Snow drifted softly outside the cafe when a tiny voice broke the silence. A little disabled girl leaning on crutches stepped inside, her cheeks red from the cold, her eyes filled with something deeper than fear, desperation. She walked straight toward the uniformed officer and his German shepherd. "Sir, can you help me?" she whispered. "Can you find my dad?" The entire cafe fell silent. The girl swallowed hard. "Please, he didn't come home last night." The officer's breath caught. His dog suddenly stood alert, staring intensely at the girl, as if it sensed something urgent. But what the officer and his police dog discovered next would uncover a truth that shocked the entire town. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Snow tapped softly against the cafe windows, the kind of gentle winter rhythm that made the whole town feel quieter than usual. Officer Blake sat at the small wooden table near the corner, warming his hands around a cup of coffee that had already started to lose its heat. Beside him, K9 Thor rested calmly, his big brown eyes following every movement around the room with quiet alertness. It was supposed to be their short break, a rare moment of stillness. Blake exhaled, letting his shoulders relax for the first time that morning. Then the cafe door opened. A cold gust swept in, carrying snowflakes and something else, a silence thick enough to make Blake look up. For a second, he thought maybe someone had slipped on the ice outside. But no. It was a child. A little girl stood frozen in the doorway, gripping two metal crutches. Her pink dress looked thin for the weather, and her small prosthetic leg peeked from beneath the hem. Her eyes were what struck Blake the most. Wide, scared, searching. Thor reacted before Blake did. His head snapped up, ears raised, body tensing. Not aggressive, just intensely focused, like he recognized something about the girl that no one else could see. She stepped inside, the crutches clicking softly against the wooden floor. People in the cafe turned to look but quickly looked away, pretending not to stare. Blake could see her trying to stay calm, her bottom lip trembling despite her brave face. She swallowed hard. Excuse me, sir." Her voice was small, shaky. Can you help me?" Blake straightened in his seat. "Of course," he said gently. "What's going on?" The girl glanced at Thor, almost hesitating, then back at Blake. Her voice cracked. Can you find my dad?" Something in Blake's chest tightened. He pushed his coffee aside and stood up slowly, lowering himself to her level. "What's your name?" "Lily," she whispered. Thor took a small step forward, sniffing the air near her, then looked at Blake with a low rumble in his throat. Not a warning, but something urgent. Blake had worked with Thor for years. He knew that sound. Thor sensed distress, maybe danger. Blake glanced outside at the falling snow, then back at the trembling little girl standing alone on crutches. A strange feeling settled in his gut, the kind of instinct officers learn not to ignore. Whatever this child had walked into his life with, it wasn't simple, and Thor felt it too. Blake guided Lily to the table slowly, making sure she didn't slip on the melting snow at the entrance. Thor walked beside her, his movements unusually gentle, as if he sensed how fragile she really was. When Lily finally sat down, she let out a shaky breath, the kind a child shouldn't have to make. Blake pulled up a chair across from her, his voice steady, patient. "All right, Lily, tell me what happened. Why are you looking for your dad?" She lowered her gaze, fingers trembling as they tightened around her crutches. He didn't come home last night." Her voice wavered like she was trying to sound brave, but fear kept slipping through. Blake felt a subtle pang in his chest. A missing parent, in a snowstorm, and a child out alone on crutches. Something was already wrong. "Did you call anyone? A neighbor? A relative?" She shook her head. "We don't have anyone. It's just me and Dad." She swallowed, blinking away tears. "He left early yesterday for work. He always calls, but he didn't." Her breath hitched. "I waited all night." Blake leaned forward, keeping his tone soft. "How did you get here?" Lily hesitated, embarrassed. "I walked." "Walked?" Blake echoed, stunned. "From where?" "From home. It's not too far." She lifted her prosthetic leg slightly. "It just takes me longer." Thor whimpered quietly, nudging her hand with his nose. Lily managed the smallest, broken smile and patted his head gently. After a moment, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a wrinkled photograph. "This is my dad." Her voice softened. "Please, I just need someone to find him." Blake took the photo carefully. A middle-aged man with tired eyes smiled back at him. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. But Thor's reaction made Blake freeze. The moment the dog leaned in to sniff the photo, his entire posture shifted. His ears snapped upright. His nose twitched rapidly. Then he looked up at Blake, sharp, focused, urgent, like he had picked up a scent. "Thor?" Blake murmured. The dog stood, tail stiff, gaze locked on the front door as if waiting for the command to move. Lily's eyes widened. Does he know something?" Blake wasn't sure how to answer. Not yet. But he knew Thor's instincts rarely failed. Something about Lily's father wasn't just missing. Something had happened, and Thor had already caught the trail. For a moment, Blake just sat there, the photograph still in his hand, the little girl staring at him with those frightened eyes. Thor stood rigid beside the table, every muscle tight, ears aimed at the door like an arrow pointing toward trouble. Blake felt that familiar tug-of-war inside his chest, the one between protocol and instinct. Missing persons cases weren't supposed to start like this. They required reports, supervisors, a timeline, proper steps. He should have called it in and let the detectives handle the rest. But something told him that doing things by the book wasn't going to help this child. Lily wiped her nose with the back of her hand, trying to be strong even as her chin trembled. "Sir, if someone took him, you have to hurry." She took a shaky breath. "What if he's cold or hurt? What if he's—" Blake raised a calming hand. Hey, don't think that way yet. We don't know anything for sure." But he felt the heaviness behind his own words. Thor suddenly let out a short, sharp bark, not loud, but insistent. He glanced at Blake, then back at the door as if saying, "What are we waiting for? Let's move." Blake exhaled slowly. Years of experience had taught him that sometimes the dog knew before the officer did. "Thor's reacting strongly," Blake said, lowering his voice. "Whatever your dad went through, it's recent. He can still follow the trail." Lily's eyes brightened with a flicker of desperate hope. "So, you'll help? You're really going to help me?" Blake hesitated only a second before nodding. "Yes, we'll start right now." Lily's breath shuddered with relief, and she clutched the handles of her crutches tightly. But when she tried to stand, her prosthetic leg slipped slightly on the wet floor. Blake immediately steadied her. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he murmured. "It's freezing. The sidewalks are icy. You could have been hurt." Lily looked down. I didn't know what else to do. That quiet confession hit him harder than he expected. He shrugged on his jacket and motioned toward the door. "Stay close to me, all right? Thor's going to lead us." Thor pushed the door open with his snout, then stepped into the snow like a soldier ready for duty. Blake guided Lily outside, his protective instincts flashing awake. The cold air bit at their faces, but Thor didn't pause even for a second. He lowered his nose to the ground and pulled sharply to the right. He had chosen a direction, a scent, a start. And Blake knew, deep down, that whatever they were about to uncover, it wouldn't be simple. The moment Thor stepped outside, the snow muffled everything, the traffic, the chatter, even the distant city sounds. It felt as if the world itself had paused, holding its breath while the K9 lowered his nose and began sweeping the ground with slow, deliberate movements. Blake zipped Lily's coat a little higher, making sure her scarf was snug around her neck. "Stay close," he said gently. "Thor's tracking now. He'll tell us where to go." Lily nodded, gripping her crutches tightly. The snow clung to her pink dress, but she didn't complain. There was a kind of fierce determination in her small, trembling face. She wasn't giving up on her father. Not for a second. Thor suddenly stiffened, inhaling sharply. Then he moved, not wandering, not guessing. He pulled forward with purpose. Blake's pulse quickened. He's got something. They followed Thor down the sidewalk, footprints crunching through the fresh layer of snow. Lily struggled to keep up, her crutches sinking slightly into the slush. After only a few steps, Blake crouched in front of her. "Hop on," he said with a soft smile. "What?" "No, I'm okay. I can—" "Lily," he interrupted gently, "we need to move faster, and your dad needs you safe." That broke her resistance. She nodded, embarrassed but relieved, and Blake lifted her into his arms. She weighed so little it startled him, like a feather, bundled in pink wool. As they moved, Lily's voice came out small. "Officer Blake, do you think my dad is hurt?" Blake hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I think he needs help, and we're going to find him." Thor led them around a corner, stopping briefly at a trash can, then moving toward an old hardware store. Every few steps he paused, sniffing, adjusting direction by inches, tracing the subtle scent patterns humans could never understand. Lily watched him anxiously. "He's amazing," Blake nodded. "Best partner I've ever had." They reached a narrow alley behind the store, the kind of place most people wouldn't dare walk through on a snowy morning. Thor stood at the entrance, tail rigid, ears tilted forward. Blake's stomach tightened. Thor only acted like this when something serious had happened. He stepped into the alley slowly, Lily clinging to his shoulder. Snow had piled unevenly here, masking the ground except for a few disturbed patches. Thor circled once, then pressed his paw firmly against a single spot near the wall. A wordless message. "Here. This is where it begins." Blake exhaled, a cold breath turning to mist. Whatever happened to Lily's father, the trail started right here. The alley felt colder than the rest of the street, as if the wind didn't bother moving through it. Everything was still, the kind of stillness that made Blake's instincts tighten. Thor stood in the center of the narrow passageway, nose pressed close to the snow, breathing in slow, deliberate bursts. His tail hovered straight behind him, neither wagging nor lowered. A sign Blake recognized instantly. He found something. Blake shifted Lily slightly in his arms so she could see. Her fingers curled into his jacket. Is my dad here?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "No," Blake murmured, scanning the area. But he was. Thor moved suddenly, pulling Blake toward a dented metal trash bin near the far wall. Something glinted beneath the thin snow. Blake knelt, brushing the powder aside with his glove. And there it was, a cracked cell phone. Not just cracked, shattered. Blake lifted it slowly. Lily gasped. That's his phone. That's my dad's." Her voice broke completely. Blake steadied her with a gentle hand. "I know. Let's see if it tells us anything." The phone wouldn't turn on, but the case was distinctive. Bright blue with a faded cartoon character sticker peeling at the edges. Lily reached out and touched it with trembling fingertips. "He never goes anywhere without it," she whispered. "He promised he'd always answer if I needed him." Blake swallowed hard. Something about the phone bothered him. The angle of the cracks, the bent corner. Someone threw this, he muttered, or stepped on it. Lily looked up at him, fear widening her eyes. You mean someone hurt him? Thor barked once, sharp, echoing off the narrow, brick walls. Then he turned toward the alley entrance and sniffed the ground again, pacing in a tight zigzag. He followed an invisible line toward the middle of the alley, then stopped near two faint depressions in the snow. Footprints. Not fresh, but clear enough to read. 2 different shoe sizes, going in one direction. Blake's heart thudded. There were other people with him. Lily's grip tightened. But why? Why would anyone take my dad? Blake didn't have the answer yet. But Thor moved again, sniffing the air near the wall. His nose brushed something lodged between the bricks, a tiny scrap of fabric, torn and frayed. Blake pulled it free. A piece of dark jacket material, but with something sticky on it. Oil? Grease? No. Engine residue? A vehicle. Thor let out a low growl, confirming Blake's suspicion. Someone forced him into a car, Blake said quietly, and they left fast. Lily's breath hitched. Then he didn't leave me. Someone took him. Her voice cracked, breaking Blake's heart a little. Yes, he said gently, and we're going to find him. Thor barked again, but this time it wasn't a warning. It was a direction, a trail, a promise. Blake adjusted his grip on Lily, lifted her higher against his chest, and nodded at his partner. Lead the way, boy. The hunt had officially begun. Thor led them out of the alley with renewed urgency, his strides longer now, his breathing sharper. Whatever scent he had picked up, it was strong. Blake followed with Lily in his arms, her crutches tucked under one elbow. Snowflakes drifted across her hair, and she kept glancing anxiously back toward the alley as if her father might suddenly reappear. They moved down the street until Thor slowed near a small food cart set up under a flickering street lamp. The vendor, an older man bundled in a thick brown coat, was wiping snow off his counter. He looked up, startled, when he saw the police officer, the service dog, and a frightened girl clinging to his jacket. "Officer," the man said, straightening nervously. "Is something wrong?" Blake approached carefully. "Sir, I'm looking for someone. A man, mid-40s, dark hair, blue jacket. Might have been here last night." He held up the cracked phone. "This belongs to him." The vendor's eyes widened in recognition. Lily noticed. "You've seen him," she blurted, her voice trembling with desperate hope. The man hesitated, rubbing his hands together as if trying to warm the memory. Yes, I saw him. Last night. It was late, maybe around 11. He pointed toward the alley they had just come from. He was there. I remember because he looked upset, like he was arguing with someone." Blake's stomach tightened. "Arguing with who?" Thor stamped a paw against the ground, impatient for answers. The vendor looked around nervously, lowering his voice. 2 men, big guys. One wore a dark hoodie, the other had a shaved head. Your man... He tried to walk away, but they followed him. The man swallowed. Then they grabbed him. Lily's breath hitched sharply. Grabbed him? Why? Why would they do that to my dad? The vendor's expression softened. "Little one, I don't know. But I heard him say something. Something like, 'I told you I won't get involved.' Then they pushed him toward a van." Blake leaned closer. "Did you see the van?" The vendor nodded. "Black. No plates on the back. They shoved him inside and drove off fast." Thor growled low, his body rigid, ears pinned forward. He tugged hard on the leash in the direction the vendor pointed, the same direction the van had gone. Lily covered her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. They took him. They really took him. Blake crouched beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "Lily, listen to me. This helps us. Now we know what happened. Now we know he didn't leave on his own." Thor gave a short bark, urgent, demanding action. The vendor stepped closer. "Officer, whoever those men were, they didn't want him to be found. You be careful." Blake gave a grim nod. "We will." He lifted Lily again, tightened his grip, and nodded to Thor. "All right, boy," he murmured, voice low and determined. "Take us to that van." Thor lunged forward, following the invisible trail of rubber, oil, and danger. The chase was no longer a guess. It was real, and it was getting darker by the minute. Thor pulled them farther down the street, following the direction the vendor had pointed out. His movements were quicker now, more purposeful, as if every step carried a warning. Blake could feel it too, that tightening in his chest, the one that told him the situation was shifting from a simple missing person case into something far more dangerous. Lily clung to him quietly, her fingers gripping his jacket. Snowflakes melted in her hair, but she didn't seem to notice. She stared ahead, eyes distant as if fighting a storm inside her own mind. After a long stretch of silence, she whispered, "Officer Blake, there's something I didn't tell you." Blake slowed down. Thor paused, too, glancing back with alert eyes. "What is it, Lily?" Blake asked gently. She looked down, guilt tightening her small shoulders. "I didn't want to say anything because I thought maybe it wasn't important. Or maybe it was just in my head." She took a shaky breath. "But my dad was scared." Blake's brows lifted. "Scared? Of what?" Lily hesitated, blinking rapidly as tears gathered at the corners of her eyes. "For the past few weeks he kept checking the windows, double-locking the door. He even moved his bed closer to mine." Her voice cracked. "I asked him why, and he just kept saying, 'Everything's fine, Lily, don't worry.'" Blake exchanged a glance with Thor, a silent, heavy understanding passing between them. "Did he tell you anything else?" Blake asked softly. She nodded slowly. "One night, I woke up because he was on the phone. He was whispering, really scared. I heard him say, 'I'm not helping you. Leave me alone.'" Her voice trembled. "When I asked about it the next morning, he got upset. He told me to promise I'd never answer the door unless he said it was okay." A cold shiver ran down Blake's spine. This wasn't random. This wasn't a simple kidnapping. Lily's father had been targeted. And yesterday," Lily continued, wiping her tears with her sleeve. "He hugged me before he left. He hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. He said, 'No matter what happens, remember, I love you.'" Her voice broke completely. Blake stopped walking, holding her closer. The weight of her confession pressed against him like a physical force. "Lily," he said softly, "you should have told me earlier." "I was scared," she whispered. "I thought if I said it out loud, it would make it real." Thor barked sharply, once loud enough to echo off the empty buildings. A warning, a push forward, a message. Whatever danger Lily's father had been running from. They were stepping straight into it. Thor continued pulling them forward, nose low, paws cutting quick, determined tracks through the snow. Blake followed close behind, Lily held securely against his chest. The cold bit at his face, but his mind was far from the temperature now. Lily's confession lingered in his thoughts like smoke that refused to fade. A man scared. A man threatened. A man refusing to help people he didn't want to be involved with. This wasn't a coincidence. Blake's radio crackled suddenly, startling Lily. He shifted her in his arms and pressed the button. "Dispatch to Officer Blake. Do you copy?" "I'm here," he answered, voice steady. "We ran a background check on the man you requested. Matthew Cole. He works at Northway Shipping Depot. We also checked recent reports connected to that location." The dispatcher paused, her tone tightening. "The facility is under quiet investigation, linked to illegal transport operations." Blake's stomach dropped. Illegal transport. Threatening phone calls. Men forcing him into a van. This lined up far too perfectly. What kind of operations? Blake asked. Smuggling, the dispatcher replied. High-value items, possibly weapons. Matthew Cole may have witnessed something, or been pressured to participate. Lily's head lifted at her father's name. What are they saying? What's happening to my dad? Blake kept his voice soft. We're getting closer, Lily. That's what matters. But inside, every instinct screamed that time was running out. Thor suddenly veered sharply to the left, crossing a deserted street and climbing over a snowbank toward the outskirts of town. Blake followed, boots crunching on ice. The air smelled. Different here. Colder, sharper, less traveled. Why are we going this way? Lily asked, tightening her arms around his neck. Thor has something, Blake murmured, watching the dog's posture. Thor's tail was stiff, his ears angled forward. He picked up his pace. Lily's voice wavered. Do you think the bad men hurt him? Blake hesitated. I think they wanted something from him. And your dad, he didn't give it. Lily sniffed, wiping her tears on her sleeve. He would never help bad people. Never. He always says people should do the right thing, even if it's hard. Blake nodded, emotion tightening his throat. Your dad sounds like a good man. He is, Lily whispered. That's why I know he didn't leave me. Something happened. Thor stopped suddenly. He stood at the edge of a long, sloping road leading toward the forested outskirts, nose to the wind, body rigid. Blake followed his gaze and felt a chill run down his spine. The scent. Trail didn't lead toward the city. It led somewhere quieter, somewhere hidden, somewhere someone could disappear without a trace. Good boy, Blake breathed. Show us the rest. Thor barked once, sharp, confident, then charged ahead. Whatever those men wanted. The forest would hold the next piece of the truth. The town slowly faded behind them as Thor charged ahead, pulling Blake and Lily toward the tree line. Snow clung to the branches like thick white blankets, and the wind carried a deeper chill, one that felt less like weather and more like warning. Blake adjusted his grip on Lily, feeling her shiver against his shoulder. You doing okay? He asked softly. Lily nodded, though her voice came out small. If Dad was here, he'd tell me not to be afraid. Blake swallowed hard. Then we won't be. Thor paused at the forest's edge, sniffing the ground intensely. His breath puffed in small clouds, ears twitching at every distant sound. Cracking. Branches, shifting wind, the muted hum of something moving far away. Blake recognized the shift in Thor's posture. The dog was no longer just tracking. He was anticipating, preparing. Why would they bring him out here? Lily whispered. Her gaze drifted over the tall, snow-covered pines, the darkness between them stretching like a path into another world. Blake didn't answer right away. The truth was uneasy, because, out here, no one would see them. Thor suddenly barked and pushed deeper between the trees. Blake followed, stepping carefully but quickly, boots crunching over frozen needles hidden under the snow. The forest felt heavier with each step, as though it were swallowing sound. A few minutes in, Thor stopped again, this time near a patch of disturbed snow. Blake knelt, lowering Lily gently so she could see. What is it? She asked. He brushed away the top layer. Underneath, something gleamed faintly. A strip of silver duct tape, torn and crumpled, partially, stuck to a small twig. Near it lay a crushed patch of snow, the shape unmistakable. Kneeling, Blake murmured. Someone was forced down here. Lily covered her mouth. Dad? Thor sniffed the duct tape, then bolted forward, dragging Blake into a narrow clearing. The tracks here were faint, but Blake spotted what Thor had sensed. 2 deep tire marks cutting across the snow into a downward slope. A vehicle came through here, Blake whispered. Recently, Lily's voice shook. But cars aren't supposed to drive this far into the woods. They're not, Blake agreed, unless someone doesn't want to be found. Thor let out a low, urgent growl and sniffed the air again. Blake noticed something else now, hanging in the cold like a memory. Oil, burnt rubber, metal, the same scent from the scrap of fabric in the alley. Thor paced tightly, nose zigzagging until he reached something half-buried beneath a fallen branch. Blake pulled it up, a laminated ID card, cracked down the middle, Matthew Cole, Lily's father. Lily's breath left her body in a single, trembling gasp. Dad. He was here. He was really here. Blake looked around the quiet, frozen clearing. Whoever had taken him was close. Too close. Thor suddenly lifted his head. His body straightened, his ears locked forward, his tail froze. Then he growled, deep, low, warning. Something, or someone, was just ahead. And they were not alone in this forest. Thor led them deeper into the woods, weaving between thick pines as if guided by an invisible thread. Blake followed close behind, breath visible in short, tense bursts. The deeper they went, the heavier the air felt. Almost like the trees themselves were holding secrets they didn't want to give up. Lily clung to Blake with both arms around his neck, her small voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think Dad's close?" Blake didn't answer right away. He needed to believe yes, but he couldn't promise anything she wasn't ready to hear. "Thor thinks so," he said softly, "and Thor's usually right." A few yards more, and the forest abruptly opened into a clearing Blake never knew existed. Nestled between the trees stood a large, run-down warehouse. Its metal siding rusted, the windows covered with grime. It looked abandoned at first glance, but something felt off. Too quiet, too still, too intentional. Thor stopped at the clearing's edge, muscles tight, ears locked forward like radar. A soft growl rumbled in his chest. "What is this place?" Lily whispered. Blake scanned the building carefully. Footprints were faint but visible near the door. Multiple pairs, definitely adult-sized and recent. He stepped closer, lowering Lily to her feet but keeping one hand on her shoulder. "Lily, stay behind me, okay?" She nodded, though fear etched into her face. Thor crept forward, nose brushing the ground. Every so often he'd lift his head towards the warehouse as if something inside was pulling him like a magnet. Blake approached the side of the building, peering through a cracked window. At first, all he saw was darkness. Then, movement. A silhouette. A faint shuffle. And he heard it. A muffled voice. Not loud, just enough to make his heart stop. "Dad," Lily breathed. Blake quickly put a finger to his lips. "Quiet, sweetheart. We don't know who else is in there." He scanned the perimeter, noting the broken back door with muddy footprints leading inside. Whoever brought Lily's father here hadn't tried to hide their tracks, which meant they didn't expect anyone to follow. Or worse, they didn't care. Blake crouched beside Lily. "Listen to me. I'm going to get your dad, but I need you to stay right beside Thor. He won't let anything happen to you." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded bravely. "Please bring him back." Blake squeezed her hand, then turned to Thor. "Guard her." Thor stepped between Lily and the warehouse, posture tall, protective, unwavering. Blake drew a steady breath and slipped through the broken back door. The inside was dim, filled with shadows stretching like long fingers across the floor. The air smelled of gasoline, cold metal, and something human, sweat, fear. Another muffled sound came from deeper inside. A man's voice, weak, strained. Blake's pulse hammered. He wasn't just in the right place. He was close, very close. Inside the warehouse, the dim light flickered from a single hanging bulb, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Blake pressed himself against the cold metal wall, steadying his breath as his eyes adjusted. Every instinct he had was on high alert. Then he heard it again, a muffled groan, strained and barely audible. Matthew. Blake inched forward, careful not to make a sound. As he rounded a corner, he finally saw them. 2 men, one with a shaved head, pacing with agitation. The other, the man in the dark hoodie, stood guard near a chair where Matthew Cole sat tied, bruised, exhaustion pulling at his features. Matthew's head hung low, but Blake could see him trembling. "Tell us where the files are," the shaved-head man hissed. "You should have done your part. Now look where you are." Matthew lifted his face, blood streaking down his cheek. "I told you. I won't help you. I won't be part of this." His voice cracked painfully. "I won't let my daughter grow up knowing I helped people like you." The man in the hoodie scoffed. "Then maybe you won't watch her grow up at all." Blake's chest tightened. That was enough. He stepped out from the shadows, voice steady but commanding. "Police! Put your hands where I can see them." Both men jerked in surprise. For a split second, Blake thought they might surrender. He was wrong. The shaved-head man grabbed Matthew by the collar, yanking him upright like a shield. "Take another step, officer, and he dies." Matthew winced, barely able to stand, but he forced out a whisper. "Run. Don't let Lily see this." Blake felt something inside him snap. "I'm not here to abandon you," he said firmly. "Your daughter is outside and she's waiting for you. Let him go." The man's eyes flickered with hesitation, just enough to reveal fear. He hadn't expected the police to find them this fast. Blake took a careful step forward, lowering his weapon slightly. "We don't have to end this badly. Let him go, and we can talk." But the hoodie man reached inside his jacket, too fast, too careless. Blake's grip tightened. "Don't," Blake warned sharply. The hoodie man pulled out a gun. Everything froze. Matthew squeezed his eyes shut. The shaved-head man shifted his weight, tightening his hold, and Blake realized he was seconds away from losing them both. Outside, Thor barked, loud, fierce, echoing through the metal walls like a warning shot. Blake steadied his stance. The standoff had begun. For one suspended heartbeat, everything inside the warehouse stood perfectly still. The kidnappers, Matthew, Blake. Even the cold air seemed frozen mid-breath. Then, Thor's bark thundered again, closer this time, sharper, filled with urgency. The man with the gun flinched, just slightly, but enough for Blake to see fear crack through his confidence. The shaved-head man tightened his grip on Matthew's collar, dragging him backwards. "Get rid of the cop," he snapped. "Now!" The man with the gun raised his weapon. But the door behind Blake suddenly slammed open. Thor exploded into the room like a streak of muscle and fury. Everything erupted at once. The gunman whipped around, stumbling at the sight of the charging K9. "What?" Thor leapt, teeth flashing, crashing into the man's arm. The gun clattered across the concrete floor, skidding into the shadows. The gunman screamed, stumbling backward as Thor pinned him, with powerful force. The shaved-head man cursed, shoving Matthew aside and lunging toward Blake with a knife pulled from his boot. Blake dodged, grabbing the man's wrist mid-swing. The blade sliced the air inches from his face. Matthew collapsed to the floor, hands trembling as he tried to crawl away. Blake twisted the attacker's arm, forcing the knife to drop. The man fought wildly, throwing punches, but Blake absorbed them, his focus unwavering. He kicked the knife aside and shoved the man hard against a support beam. "Stay down," Blake barked. Thor growled, holding the gunman firmly but without mauling him. Just enough pressure to keep him frozen, too afraid to move. Matthew, shaking, lifted his head. "Officer, Lily, is she—" "She's safe," Blake said, not taking his eyes off the attackers. "She's outside, waiting for you." Matthew's breath broke into a sob he didn't have the strength to hide. The shaved-head man tried one last desperate attempt to shove Blake off, but Blake pinned him easily, locking his arms with practiced precision. Seconds later, the man collapsed in defeat. Thor stepped back, giving a final intimidating rumble that silenced the gunman completely. The warehouse, moments ago filled with violence, now throbbed with silence broken only by Matthew's shaky breaths. Blake exhaled deeply, adrenaline still burning through him. "Good boy," he said to Thor, who stood proud and alert, chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. Matthew wiped his eyes. "I thought I'd never see her again." Blake helped him up. "You will. Right now." And in that moment the promise of reunion felt stronger than the cold, the fear, or the darkness they'd just fought through. Thor led the way back toward the door, toward Lily, toward hope. The moment Blake stepped out of the warehouse with Matthew leaning heavily on his shoulder, Lily's voice sliced through the cold air like a tiny, trembling bell. "Dad!" Matthew froze. For a heartbeat he didn't believe what he was hearing. His battered face lifted, eyes widening as Lily dropped her crutches and stumbled forward, falling straight into his arms. He caught her, pulling her close with a desperate, shaking embrace. "Lily, my baby." "I'm here," he whispered, voice breaking. "I'm here." She clung to him as if afraid he would disappear again. "I knew you didn't leave me. I knew it." Matthew buried his face in her hair, tears slipping down his cheek. Blake stood a few feet away, giving them space. Thor sat beside him, tail gently thumping the snow, watching the reunion with calm, quiet eyes. After a long moment, Matthew finally lifted his head, turning to Blake. "Officer, I don't know how to thank you. I thought I was done for." Blake shook his head. "Just tell me what happened. We need to understand who these men are." Matthew exhaled shakily, holding Lily close as he spoke. "They wanted me to help move. Shipments through my job at the shipping depot.
You're safe.
Illegal shipments. I don't know everything they were transporting, but it was bad. Weapons, most likely." Lily's small hands tightened on his jacket. "Dad, why didn't you tell me you were scared?" Matthew swallowed hard. "Because I didn't want to frighten you. I wanted to protect you from all this." Blake stepped closer, his tone firm but not unkind. "When did this start?" "About 2 months ago," Matthew answered. "They approached me after work, said they needed someone on the inside. I refused. They told me to think about it." His voice cracked again. "But last night, they told me there wasn't a choice anymore. They wanted access to restricted loading areas. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd come for Lily." Lily's breath hitched, and Matthew hugged her tighter. "I tried to stay silent," he continued. "I tried to protect her, but they took me instead." Blake nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of the confession. "You did the right thing. You stood your ground. We'll make sure they're prosecuted." Matthew looked at Lily again, brushing snow from her hair. "I'm so sorry you had to go out there alone. You must have been terrified." Lily shook her head. "Thor and Officer Blake found you. I knew they would." Blake glanced at his K-9 partner, pride softening his expression. Thor never quits on someone who needs help. And as they stood there in the quiet clearing, the truth finally released its grip, replaced by relief, by fragile hope, and by the promise that the danger was ending. By the time backup arrived, the forest clearing had transformed from a place of fear into one filled with quiet relief. Officers moved quickly to secure the kidnappers and gather evidence, but Blake stayed close to Lily and Matthew, keeping a protective eye on them as paramedics checked Matthew's injuries. Matthew winced when the medic touched a bruise along his ribs. "Just make sure she's okay," he murmured, nodding toward Lily. Lily held his hand tightly, refusing to let go even for a second. "I'm fine," she whispered. "I'm only okay because you're here now." The medic smiled softly. "She's one brave kid." Thor sat beside them, alert but visibly calmer now that the danger had passed. Lily reached out with her free hand and gently stroked his fur. "You saved my dad," she said quietly, "and you kept me safe too." Thor lifted his head proudly, leaning just slightly into her touch. A small gesture, but one that made Lily's eyes shine with gratitude. Blake walked over, hands resting on his duty belt, his expression warm despite the exhaustion settling into his bones. "Matthew, you're going to need medical attention and temporary protection. The department can arrange both. You and Lily will be placed somewhere safe until the investigation is over." Matthew nodded, swallowing hard. I never wanted Lily to be dragged into this. I just didn't know how to protect her on my own. "You did protect her," Blake said gently, "by refusing to help those men, and by holding on long enough for us to find you." Matthew's eyes softened. "Thank you, officer, for everything. If you hadn't listened to her, I don't know what would have happened." Blake looked down at Lily, who was still petting Thor with slow, grateful motions. "She didn't give up," he said. "She walked through a snowstorm on crutches because she believed her dad needed help. That kind of courage is rare." Lily blushed, hiding her face in Matthew's coat. "I just wanted my dad back." Blake smiled. "And you made it happen." As officers escorted the kidnappers to waiting vehicles and the paramedics prepared the ambulance, Blake helped Lily and Matthew inside. Thor hopped in behind them, settling carefully so Lily could lean against his warm fur. Matthew exhaled shakily. "For the first time in weeks, I feel like we might actually be safe." Blake placed a reassuring hand on the door. "You're not alone anymore. We'll protect both of you." Lily looked up, her voice barely a whisper. "Is everything going to be okay now?" Blake met her eyes with quiet certainty. "Yes, it will be." And as the ambulance doors closed, carrying them toward a safer tomorrow, Thor watched with steady, loyal eyes, knowing his job wasn't done yet. A new beginning had just started. 3 weeks later, the snow had melted into soft patches along the sidewalks, and the town felt gentler somehow. Quieter, safer. Blake sat in the same cafe where everything had begun, a fresh cup of coffee steaming in front of him. Thor lay at his feet, eyes half closed, finally enjoying a rare moment of peace. The bell above the cafe door chimed softly. Blake looked up. Lily stepped inside, balancing confidently on her crutches, her pink scarf fluttering behind her like a little banner of hope. She spotted Blake instantly and broke into a bright smile. "Officer Blake." Behind her came Matthew, healthier now. The bruises faded, his posture no longer weighed down by fear. He carried a small paper bag, but Lily held something even more precious, something she kept hidden behind her back. Thor lifted his head, ears perked in recognition. Lily giggled and hurried over as fast as her crutches allowed. "You look stronger," Blake said warmly. "I've been practicing," she announced proudly. "Dad says I walk braver now." Matthew nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Safer housing, medical care, witness protection. You made all of that possible. We owe you everything." Blake shook his head. "You owe me nothing. You did the hard part, surviving." But Lily shook her head. "No. Thor saved my dad, and you saved both of us." She finally pulled her hands from behind her back. In her palms lay a tiny handmade medal, cut from cardboard, wrapped in shiny foil, with the words carefully written in a child's handwriting. "To Thor, my hero." Blake felt a tightness in his chest he hadn't expected. Lily knelt awkwardly and placed the medal on Thor's collar. The big dog sat perfectly still, as if he understood the importance of the moment. His tail thumped gently against the floor. "There," Lily whispered. "Now everyone will know what you did." Thor leaned forward and nudged her cheek with his nose. She giggled, brushing his fur lovingly. Matthew placed a hand on Blake's shoulder. "You restored our family. I'll never forget that." Blake nodded, but his gaze drifted back to Lily and Thor, two souls who had found strength in each other when the world had turned dark. "Sometimes," Blake said quietly, Heroes come in small steps. Or 4 paws. Lily beamed. And sometimes police officers listen to little girls when no one else will. Blake chuckled softly. I'm glad I listened. Outside, sunlight spilled across the street, warming the last bits of snow. Lily hugged Thor one more time before turning to Blake. We're safe now, right? Blake smiled. Yes, Lily, and you always will be. Because courage, whether from a child or a dog, has a way of changing everything.